That press conference with the premiers and the Prime Minister is going to get underway any minute now. When it does happen, we will, of course, take it live on our watch and share it with you. In the meantime, we've got one of the ministers who was a part of the meeting all day. Chrystia Freeland oversees internal trade and transport, and she joins us live here on set in Saskatoon. Hi, Minister. It's good to see you.
It's great to be with you, Vashi, and great to be in beautiful, sunny Saskatoon, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a beautiful day. Thank you for making the time. I want to start on internal trade, and I'm not sure what you're able to disclose prior to the press conference starting, but I think there is some confusion over how fast this stuff is going to get done, in particular the federal side of things. What can you say to answer the question of speed?
What I can say is the federal government is absolutely committed to doing everything in our power as fast as we can to build one Canadian economy, not 13. Obviously, we don't have a majority in the House of Commons, so we can't guarantee what will happen there. But what I can tell you is we are going to table legislation very quickly, and the federal government will be acting unilaterally to lift all remaining federal barriers to internal trade. And what I also want to say is this is an issue that at the table today was unanimously supported by premiers of provinces and territories. And what they said, every single one, is people in my province, they get it. They want us to have one Canadian economy, not 13. They understand this is going to add $200 billion to our economy without costing us a penny at a time when we urgently need more economic growth. So there was a very strong consensus that sort of almost magically, right now there is a national consensus that we need to do this, that after all, we're all Canadian and we should trust each other. And you know, if a dental hygienist is good enough to clean someone's teeth in Edmonton, Alberta, it should be okay for her to clean someone's teeth in London, Ontario. If a sausage which is produced in New Brunswick is good enough for people in Moncton to eat, it should be good enough for people here in Saskatoon to eat. It's actually like there's a thicket of regulation. There's a lot of work we need to do to push through it. But at the end of the day, the idea is really simple. And what I love about it is it's about Canadians trusting each other and us, without spending a single penny, making ourselves $200 billion richer. That's about $5,000 per Canadian.
I do want to ask about that number and in particular what informs it, because the studies that I've read that come to the conclusion that that much can be added to the economy or that much economic activity can be generated include, for example, getting rid of barriers like supply management, which no federal party is in support of. Quebec clearly outlined on Friday they were not in support of that either. They've also pushed back on, for example, construction standards and harmonizing them. So is the impact really what your government is saying it's going to be, or is it going to be much less?
So I did a roundtable, I think it was last week, with a group of the leading economists who study this issue, people like Trevor Toome, Ryan Mnuchin, and then also some of the Bay Street Bank economists to talk about exactly this issue. And you're right. There are different estimates. Some economists, including Trevor, who did that IMF report, say it will add up to 4% to our GDP. Others, like CIBC, a little more conservative, they say it will be 1% of our GDP. For me, at the end of the day, we don't know for sure. But everyone is agreed this is going to be a good thing. It will make our economy stronger. It will make us richer at a time when Canadian businesses are struggling to export their goods to the U.S. It will make it easier for them to sell their goods and services to fellow Canadians. So I think the key point is this doesn't cost us any money. It makes us all richer. It helps Canadian businesses who are really getting beaten up by the U.S. right now and Canadian workers. It's the right thing to do, and this is the right moment.
But isn't the question of how much richer relevant to the conversation? The Prime Minister has not just said, you know, in principle, everyone will be a bit better off. He said the economy will be transformed into the strongest in the G7. Like, the promise is a very specific one, and your government has said this is going to add $200 billion to the economy and kind of sold provinces and Canadians on that. And it's not necessarily the case because, for example, again, where it's not politically advantageous for everyone to get on board around supply management, nobody is, or getting rid of those barriers.
Well, I actually disagree, Vashi. Like, the economic analysis behind the idea that lifting internal trade barriers will make Canada richer is incredibly robust. It's been published by the IMF. It has been confirmed by every single economist who has studied it.
But it
Are there
includes
differences?
everything. Yeah. 1 in 4 is not the same amount. Like, it's a big difference.
No, of course there's a difference, but 1% of GDP is a lot, too. And so I think it is tremendously important for us to recognize this is a big deal. This will add a lot to our economy. It will do it at a time when we need it. It doesn't cost us any money to do it. And the Canadians I talk to and the premiers that I have just spent the day with, they get it. It makes intuitive sense to have one economy, not 13, for Canadians to trust each other. I mean, I think when we think of how we want to live our lives, how we want our economy to work, we think a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. And I think that we really recognize the basic common sense that if, cheese that you can sell in Manitoba is good enough for people in Manitoba, it should be good enough for people in BC. I think we recognize that a nurse who works in Saskatchewan and is qualified there should be able to work on PEI. It's just,
but it's okay for Quebec to keep protecting supply management?
Well, actually, Vashi, as you know, supply management is a national program. It's not a provincial program. So this is
concentrated in Ontario and Quebec, though. And Quebec is the one who said we're not going here.
Actually, there are dairy farms across the country, and they all benefit from supply management. That's not a provincial program. It's a national program. Free trade in Canada is something that will make us all richer. It won't cost us any money. It's about Canadians trusting each other. And we have a real-life example. Australia did this about 30 years ago, and they did it using the mutual recognition approach that Canadians are using right now. And it's worked. It made the Australian economy stronger, and it knitted Australia more closely together as a country. And I'm just really excited because this is the kind of policy, it reminds me of early learning in childcare. It's the kind of policy that policy experts have thought for a long time was the right thing to do. But it is tricky. There are tons and tons of specific lobbies opposed to it. And what is very exciting to me is that right now Canadians recognize this is a critical moment for Canada. This is something that makes sense, that we can do for each other, that doesn't cost us anything, will make us all richer. And I was very inspired by the conversation around the table where First Ministers unanimously said, I want to do this. The people in my province believe in it. Let's get it done. I really think that this is a breakthrough moment for Canada.
Will the federal portion of it, will that legislation be introduced in this sitting?
It will be introduced very, very soon.
But does that mean in this sitting? Because the Prime Minister has explicitly said, actually, in the election, he said it'd all be done by July 1st. Now, and in the platform, and now he's saying it'll be introduced, the legislation, by July 1st. Will it be?
I'm not going to get ahead of the press conference, but let me just say we're going to introduce it really fast. And let me also say, I would like to pass this legislation really, really quickly. Now is a critical moment. Now is not a time when Canada can afford to dither. We all recognize the challenge that the U.S. tariffs pose to the Canadian economy. And from my perspective, that means there is no excuse for delaying doing things that will make us richer right now that don't cost any money. So I want to take this opportunity to say to all the other members of the House of Commons, I would love this legislation to pass through unanimous consent. This is something that we can all get behind. It should not be controversial. It should be a moment when we shake hands and say, Canadians, let's trust each other. Let's build one economy, not 13. Truly, it's as simple as that.
On that point, I do want to ask you about something else that I know that premiers talked about going into that meeting, and you were there in the meeting all day, and that is what they would term barriers to exactly what you just laid out. Basically, improving the economy, doing things that don't cost a lot in order to improve the economy. And in particular, the premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario say, get rid of C-69 and get rid of the emissions cap. Both of those things the Prime Minister stood by during the campaign. And then after the campaign, I did an interview with him. He opened the door to getting rid of them. What is the position of your government? Are you going to get rid of C-69 and the emissions cap on the oil patch?
And again, I'm not going to get ahead of the Prime Minister and the Premiers at their press conference. But what I will say is another very important, very substantive part of the discussion we had with First Ministers today was now is the time to build Canada. Someone said, build, baby, build. And,
it was the Prime Minister on election night.
Yeah. And he said it again today.
But what does that mean? Like, I asked in all seriousness.
He's
not being explicit. It's national projects, but how do we do that when we haven't been able to the whole 10 years you were in government?
With our One Canada legislation. This is going to be transformative legislation that allows us to get major projects in Canada built at the speed that we need to get them built. You will hear more from the Prime Minister and First Ministers, but this is going to be about much swifter project approvals. It will be about the federal government and provinces and territories working together rather than having overlapping approvals processes. It will be about working closely with Indigenous people. And
they're worried that won't be the case. The president, or the national chief of the AFN, pardon me, came on our program tonight saying she has communicated to your government that right now what this sounds like is an infringement on the duty to consult them.
No, and that's why I mentioned the role of Indigenous people is very important. You know that as finance minister, one of the things that I introduced was a $5 billion Indigenous loan guarantee program. The Prime Minister has doubled that to $10 billion. A really important part of getting big projects built in Canada at the speed the moment requires will be working closely with Indigenous people. It will be having Indigenous participation in the projects. But I want to pull back for a minute. And I just really want to emphasize this is a critical moment for Canada. We are facing a huge economic challenge from the United States. We are at a time of real geopolitical turbulence and threats in the world. This is a moment when we as a country need to stop getting in our own way, and when we as a country have to find a way, while respecting Indigenous people, while respecting the environment, to build big things. We have been endowed as a country with tremendous natural resources. Now is a time when we have to build the infrastructure that it takes to get those resources to market. And I have to say, the conversation we had today is the most optimistic conversation I have heard on these issues in my time as an MP. And there were NDP premiers around the table. There were Liberal premiers around the table. There were Conservative premiers around the table. We have a Liberal Prime Minister. I think you are going to see that this is a moment of Canada coming together to build Canada and to build the strongest economy in the G7.
The premiers are stepping up, so I have like 20 seconds. Why are Canadians to believe this new Liberal government will accomplish what the previous Liberal government, of which you were a huge part of, could not in building all that stuff? You had to spend $34 billion to get one pipeline built.
Well, I am proud of TMX, and that is a nation-building project. And we talked today about the importance of TMX, how it adds to the diversification of the Canadian economy at a time when we need it. It gives Canada some real strategic leverage, and it is adding money.
And you created an environment you had to spend all that taxpayer money to get it built.
TMX is adding money to the Canadian economy every single day. I am so glad as a Canadian we have it, and I am proud to be the minister who got that project done. And what we need to do now is have a number of big, comparable nation-building projects.
Is it going to cost taxpayers that much,
built a lot faster, and we do have to create the kind of environment that will give the private sector the kind of certainty to come in and participate, and I'm absolutely confident that'll be what we do.
Even though you couldn't before?
I'm absolutely confident that will be what we do.
Okay, we'll leave it on that note. Saved by the Premiers. Thank you very much, Minister. It's a pleasure to see you. That is the Minister for Transport and Internal Trade, Chrystia Freeland.